afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Firstly, I know most of you have already muted yourselves and turned off your cameras, but if you haven't, please do so. We're expecting quite a lot of attendees, so this will really help conserving bandwidth. My name is Sarah Davidson, and I'm the Member Services Coordinator at CAVAL here in Melbourne, Victoria. I'm very pleased to introduce Ange Jenkins to you today, who will say a few words of welcome and introduction. Ange is Coordinator Library Frontline Services at Federation University. She's also the chair of the CAVAL Customer Services and Collaboration Network, CSCN. Thank you, Ange.
Thanks, Sarah. On behalf of CAVAL and the CSCN, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands across Australia and New Zealand where we live, learn and work. We acknowledge and celebrate the inherent strengths of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and communities and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, sky and culture. We also acknowledge the people of these lands maintain knowledge through oral tradition practiced for generations. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd now like to welcome you all to the second Community of Practice event in CSCN's online series, Frontline Stories from a Pandemic. Usually our communities of practice events are face-to-face affairs with a smaller audience, but we're very happy this year to be offering these sessions to a larger audience in both Australia and New Zealand. Webinar etiquettes and further information about this session can be found through clicking on the links provided at the top of the chat. If you have any technical questions during the presentation, please type your question into the chat and the CAVAL team will assist you. This session will start off with a presentation, which is followed by a facilitated Q&A. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat and our facilitator will ask them in the Q&A segment. If you can place a Q before a question, this will assist the facilitator to distinguish between questions and comments. Thank you. So Kimberly Ferrier will be our facilitator today, and Kimberly is the Information Services Officer at Monash Uni Library. Thanks, Kimberly. And now I'm very pleased to introduce you to our presenters today, Melissa Placek and Marnie Sier from Trobe University Library, where Melissa is Library Learning Advisor and Marnie is Senior Library Learning Advisor. The presentation is about how they transition to online-only client services across 5 campuses. I'm sure we're all looking forward to learning more about Marnie and Melissa's experiences. Thanks to you both. Over to you, Marnie and Melissa.
Hello, thank you for the introduction. I'm just working on sharing my screen for you. Are you seeing the front slide now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. So for those who are perhaps not from Victoria here, just to let you know, La Trobe University has 5 campus libraries spread across Victoria. They are in Albury-Wodonga over here, Bendigo, Bundoora, which is a suburb of Melbourne, Mildura, and Shepparton. In 2020, the co-curricular team, which is the team that provide frontline library services, has had between 18 and 20 continuing staff. So the changing environment due to COVID, on March 17th, La Trobe University paused teaching to transition to online learning. The demand for the library virtual services greatly increased. By March 26th, all campus libraries completely closed, with all staff instructed to work from home. At this time, daily team-wide meetings were instituted across the team to discuss changes to services. By March 30, one combined roster for across all 5 campuses was created to meet the demand for virtual services. The demand for our chat service, for instance, increased over 250% when library buildings closed. So just a bit of information about how we used to roster services before COVID. Individual campuses did a concierge navigator role, which is sort of a greeting customers at the front of the library, as well as help desks for more in-depth queries. Roving, which was point of need service, so we could help students in the collections. Many of our libraries have various levels, so the help zone is not always near where people need help. We also had separate phone shifts, rosters, weekend and evening shifts were separate, and classes were all presented at the individual campuses. The only shared rostering we did at that time was the chat roster. And during lockdown, we had to cease some of our services completely, so concierge, help desk and roving could no longer happen. The shared rostering, the chat, we extended the hours of chat, and we added to the shared rostering the phone shifts, weekend and evening shifts and classes. And for the beginning, also the Learning Hub, and we'll explain a bit more about how that changed later in the presentation. So this is just an example of one of our rosters before lockdown. This is just Bundoora campus only. So before the closure of libraries on March 12, this was an individual day. So because it was early in semester, a busy time, we had multiple people doing the navigator concierge role. The shifts, those shifts and also the roving shifts were covered not only by our team, these particular shifts were, but some shifts were covered by other teams from the library and also casual staff. For the Learning Hub, you can also see the gap in that day there. Our team covered particular times of day and other shifts were covered by another library team. And the chat roster, as I mentioned, was the one that was already cross campus, and you can see on this particular day various campuses covered all the different hourly shifts. So this one's also from before lockdown, but a bit closer to lockdown, so after teaching was moved online in the final week of the library being open. And you can see that the chat hours have been extended to begin from 8:30. Previously they started at 11. We also extended them slightly on the weekends for an extra hour. And that current time is 1 till 5 p.m. Fortunately, we had centralised our phone roster just before lockdown, so we were able to move that into an all-campus combined roster as well. So this is the first roster we completed across all 5 campuses. This was done using the Shifts application in Microsoft Teams. This is only a small section, less than half of the full roster, and just shows each line is an individual staff member's day. So at this stage until May the 8th, the Learning Hub shifts were shared between our team and the Learning and Teaching team who do discipline-specific outreach, and usually with one staff member from each team on each shift. And at this time, we tended to roster 2 people on phones and 2 on chat during the daytime shifts up until 5 p.m. And from 5 till 7 p.m. and also on weekends 1 till 5, we had 2 staff who covered both together. And this is more of a current roster from this week. Once again, only part of it. So at present, 1 staff member from our team works from each campus on weekdays, either a whole or part day, apart from the Bundoora campus in metropolitan Melbourne, which is still completely closed. We opened for 1 week in July and then had to close again. So that we've all been at home. Our Albury-Wodonga campus library staffing is shared with Wodonga TAFE staff. So you can see this person here, for example, is a Wodonga person, and this shift here is a desk shift they're doing. But because it's a shared roster, they don't have to be out on the floor all day, even though they're the only person from our team on campus that day. Our Bendigo campus library is still under renovation. It's due to fully open next week, and more staff will be required to be rostered there when that happens as well. And we've slightly changed the number of shifts, the number of people rostered per shift at this time. So during the busier middle part of the day, from about 10 till 3:30, we try to have 3 people on chat and just 1 on phones where possible. Sometimes we do a combined chat and phone shift where we can't find enough people. And Melissa will explain to you why we need more people now.
Thank you. So as Marnie mentioned earlier, prior to COVID-19, library staff from multiple teams used to offer in-depth consultations in the Learning Hub. This service operated on 6 La Trobe campuses, with staff from Bundoora travelling to the city campus to offer the service there. When campus libraries closed, the Learning Hub was moved online and could be accessed via Zoom in the LMS. Unfortunately, we didn't see a significant uptake of the service by students, so it was decided to trial a different method to offer these consultations. In mid-May, we began offering Zoom sessions to students during chat or phone interactions, so we could meet them at their point of need rather than redirecting them to another service. These sessions also replicate, as closely as possible at the moment, the face-to-face service that some queries require. The feedback from students has been positive, and if the query requires more discipline-specific knowledge, we can get them to book an appointment with one of our senior library learning advisors. Next slide. Prior to COVID-19, our classes were nearly all run on campus and organised individually by each location. Only a few sessions were run online to accommodate students that couldn't attend in person. Shifting our services online, though, required us to update our class content so we could still include interactive activities with students. It also provided a great opportunity to create some new classes to support students that were experiencing difficulties navigating digital resources. Our classes, for the time being, are all via Zoom, with 1 staff member presenting and a 2nd staff member on chat. Students have been really engaged with this new format, and it seems that they feel more comfortable asking questions on chat than putting their hand up in a classroom. And they also appreciate the quick response they can get this way. It's also been valuable for us to see how colleagues from different campuses deliver the content and to get a fresh perspective. One of the most exciting aspects of the changes to classes, though, is the work was done as a peer-to-peer activity involving cross-campus collaboration. This provided us with a valuable opportunity to work with colleagues from other campuses that we normally wouldn't get to collaborate with, and was a great chance to learn from each other's expertise. Our regular project meetings included a sort of peer review process to ensure the content was of a high standard, and this approach also served as a valuable learning experience for staff. Next slide. Thank you. With the changes to rostering and service delivery, coordinating staff across 5 campuses required clear and efficient communication. Just before we transitioned to working from home, we started using Microsoft Teams. Amongst our team, this has become our primary source of communication. When campus libraries closed, we began having daily meetings on Teams to keep up to date on changes, check in with colleagues, and discuss any issues. As we've adapted to our new work environment, though, we've been able to reduce the frequency of these meetings. On Teams, we also have threads to post and discuss changes and updates to services or rostering, and these threads also have a space to store files so they can be easily found and shared. This has also helped to reduce the volume of emails being sent around the team, which has been a nice bonus. A particularly helpful feature of Microsoft Teams, though, is the chat. We have one that includes our entire team and was created to help us support each other with libchat queries. This has been great if you get stuck on a campus-specific question that you're not sure about, or you need someone to take over a chat so you can get to a meeting on time. You just pop it into the team-wide chat, and staff that are available to help will respond straight away, and it saves you wasting 5 or 10 minutes trying to call different colleagues to check who's available. Next slide. Thanks. And we just wanted to finish with some of the key lessons we've learned, and we aim to continue going forward. Offering Zoom consultations and more online classes has allowed us to connect with students in a way we normally wouldn't be able to. Now we have the resources and experience to teach classes with students from different campuses or states, and can easily provide a consultation to an international student that isn't able to travel to Australia due to the current pandemic. This has been an important step to providing the same high level of service to all users, regardless of location. Increased cross-campus collaboration has been the biggest highlight for most of our team. Some staff members from different campuses have never met, and this has provided a wonderful opportunity to not only get to know each other, but learn from each other as well, and has resulted in improved resources and services for our students. And finally, the year has been incredibly stressful for all, and our students have been no exception. But the feedback from students and staff has been overwhelmingly positive. They have been patient and understanding while we trialed new things, and grateful for the various ways we've adapted to support them, which has helped make this transition such a rewarding experience. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you for that. So we do have some questions already. Everyone, please feel free to keep asking. Can I dive into the question?
Sure.
Lovely. So the first one from Ange is, how was your experience of using shifts for rostering?
I'll take that one because I'm the rostering guru of this team. So we had, I think Melissa mentioned, we had only quite recently moved to using Teams at all, and Shift itself, I didn't have access to editing until I think I already was working from home. If not, it was on my last day at work. So it was a bit of a challenge, not just having to use it for the team I was used to rostering, but also spreading it to all the rest of the campuses. One thing I found was that perhaps it was more, as I guess the name shifts implies, it was perhaps more designed to be rostering like a day's worth of shifts for a person, like a time of working, rather than the individual tasks within that day. But it certainly could be adapted for our needs, and we've slightly changed the way it looks, as you might have noticed if you had enough time to pay attention to the slides, just to make it a bit easier for us. I used to actually name the shifts by what they were and the time. But if you don't just leave it as the time, which is the default, then if you want to move it to put it in a different time slot, you have to remember to change the time, or you've got conflicting times happening on the title and the time itself. But in general, I found it good. You can view your shifts on an iPad or another device if you're not logged into your computer yet and want to have a look at your own shifts. So you don't have to look at that full view that I had. You can show just your own shifts when you're looking for yourself. I was just trying to show a bit of the whole team look. Yeah.
And that was a new implementation, or you used it in the past as well?
New. We'd previously used Outlook and Excel.
Oh, okay.
I'm not 100% sure what the other campuses did. Sorry.
Is there an average number of chat shifts our staff are expected to do in a week?
I haven't counted what the average is. Most people probably do around 4-ish hours of shifts of either chat or phone or both in an average day, I would say. Do you think that's about right, Melissa?
Yeah, I usually have probably 2 chat shifts, sometimes 3 in a day.
And the shifts are generally 1 to 1.5 hours, sometimes 2, no more than 2 hours. Sorry, you're on mute, Kimberly.
My goodness, I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Touched on this a little bit at the end there, but has this cross-campus collaboration increased the connectedness between the staff members across the campuses?
I think yes.
Yeah, definitely. I would say for myself, being a newer staff member at La Trobe, there's a lot of colleagues from other campuses that I hadn't previously met, and since we've been doing a lot more cross-campus collaboration and just the daily meetings, I actually feel like I've gotten to know everyone pretty well. So definitely has increased the connectedness for me personally, but I think most of our team feels
me
the
as
same
well.
way.
I've been here a significant number of years, but yeah, even so, it's helped, definitely.
Lovely. And another one, did the new working arrangements require staff to learn new software and or skills?
Probably not everyone would have used Zoom a lot, would you think, Melissa?
No, I know, yeah, a fair few people hadn't used Zoom very much before we transition to working from home, but so everyone did have a bit of training with that, definitely to start with.
And there were even some staff who hadn't used our chat software yet, or who hadn't used the phone software. So depending on location and prior roles, some people had more training requirements than others. And obviously those people weren't pushed straight into it. They had time to learn before going on.
And which services had the greatest demand from users? So for example, chat, phone, and I can ask this in two parts. And are there other services users have wanted that you don't provide?
Chat would be our most popular. As I mentioned in the stats, how much that increased. We do find phones pick up a bit at certain times. Like it seems like when the government announces changes to the restrictions that mention libraries, and often in those times they mean public libraries, but people hear libraries are reopening, something like that, you suddenly get a bit of flurry of calls. Or when we actually do make a change ourselves to do with something to do with opening or that type of thing, they seem to want to ring you about that. But in general, chat is definitely our busiest, which is why we've increased the number of people on chat at any one time and just the one person on phone usually.
And
I'm not sure about what they want that we don't offer. Any thoughts on that, Melissa?
To begin with, when the Learning Hub was still a designated spot on the LMS for students to access, we did get the demand for Zoom sessions from chat and phone calls as well. But since we've adjusted and offering Zoom sessions directly from phone and chat, students have been really happy with that. So that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, I guess we should also explain the Learning Hub also includes services that aren't library services. So peer learning advisors and academic skills advisors, English language advisors, that sort of help is also available from that site. So the library link now just goes to our chat, but the other links still exist as well, and they also run Zoom sessions as they always have. They're soon actually going to be part of, in the overall university structure, the Learning Hub is going to be brought more into the library fold. So yeah, that might lead to some interesting changes too, some more collaboration.
that's awesome. And have you talked about how and if to continue the cross-campus collaboration post-COVID?
We have discussed it, the fact that we want it to continue, that we find it's a benefit, and I think everyone's intention is for it to continue in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that we've discussed it is everyone connecting via Zoom rather than just maybe the Bundoora staff being in a meeting room and having the Zoom up with staff from other campuses. So if we all connect to Zoom in the same way, then it's just a better
for everyone.
Yeah, more even playing field.
Great. And Mesa has a question. How have you collected and measured staff and student feedback?
So we recently had a survey running, which was for all coursework students. I don't think we've got the results from that yet, because it was only quite recently. So that's one big way. With collecting it, we have a statistic program which we use for both phone and chat, where we record. Well, the phone has its own little, you pick a category option, but if you then go into a Zoom, you can use this other form we have which says, did you go into phone or chat? Did you go into Zoom? The main query type, you can pick a couple of them if it's covered multiple, whether you completed the transaction or referred them on to someone else or suggested they come back, the amount of time you spent, and if it's a more in-depth one, we're asked to try to get a bit more information, such as their degree, their college or discipline area, if they mentioned a specific subject area, that sort of thing. But for a shorter thing, we're not expected to get all of that information.
All right, and that kind of goes into the next question, which was, are you collecting stats on the types of queries you're receiving?
Yes.
And do all staff grade levels participate in the chat and phones?
Yes, to some extent. So we have from level 4 to 7 regularly participate. Our manager will occasionally do a shift if we're particularly short, but I certainly try not to burden her with any shifts. So she can certainly do it if called on. And back when we were in the library, she'd pop out on the floor and everything as well. So yeah, pretty much everyone in the team can contribute to those shifts. Obviously, if something's going to be a bit more in depth and someone at a lower level has begun the session, they're, as Melissa mentioned in her part, where we can contact on chat and things in the chat, you can get a colleague to take over if you're not comfortable. So everyone's fine with taking over for people if needed. Someone can put, is anyone comfortable to help with AGLC referencing or something like that? And you'll get a volunteer.
And Tamara actually asks, what software do you use for chat?
What's it called again, Melissa? Do you remember? We're about to get a new one.
Yeah, we're in the process of looking at different software.
It's quite old, our chat one, and you can't do things like when you're trying to help with referencing, you can't put it in italics and things like that. So, and you can't go back and edit it, and I don't know, it's a little, when you put links in, you have to take the S out of HTTPS. So yeah, it's got a few little things you have to get around the quirks of, but yeah, sorry, I can't remember what it's called.
That's all right, a few suggestions.
If someone wants to know, I can get back to them.
A few people have mentioned Zendesk and LibChat or LBChat. So
we call it LibChat. I don't know if that means LBChat or if that's just our branding of it.
And last question for the moment, did you offer a virtual concierge for your help desk, etc.?
No. When we were in the buildings, there was a real person out there, and the buildings were not open much without there being staff. So we had to close the buildings completely. So there wasn't really. I've seen that happening in other libraries, but yeah, our building was closed, so it wasn't really something we needed to do. I don't know if it might happen in future depending on how the restrictions change, but the regions were able to open enough to have people there, and Bundoora is not yet open, so yeah.
Lovely. That's all the questions that we have at the moment. Was there any more monitoring the chat?
I think you covered all of them.
Thank you. So I'm going to take that as a no more questions from everyone. Right, so thank you so much today for the speakers and facilitator for the presentation. It's funny, I know there's a lot of buzzwords that go around at the moment, you know, agile, pivot, and those kind of words. But you know, listening to you talk, you know, I can really hear that you have been very agile in your approach. It's wonderful to hear that you've been able to do that to support your students. I'm sure they're very, very thankful. So thank you to everyone who participated today and made it such an engaging session. I would also like to thank Caval and CSCN for organising the event, and particularly Sarah at Caval for your wonderful organisational skills. Please feel free to contact the speakers with any further questions you may have after the webinar. You can send an email to members@caval.edu.au and you'll be provided with their contact details. I also want to mention that as a small token of thanks to the speakers and facilitator in this webinar, CSCN and Caval have arranged for native trees to be planted by a community group through the organisation 15 Trees. This year, a lot of their trees will be planted in areas affected by the bushfires earlier in 2020. And for anyone who's interested, 15 Trees have a great Instagram feed and social media presence. Please let us know what you thought of this webinar by filling out the online survey, which will be sent to you shortly. This will assist CSCN in improving future events and webinars. And finally, a reminder that our next Community of Practice event is held this Thursday from 2 till 2:30. Angela from RMIT University Library, where she is Advisor Frontline Services Education Portfolio, will present about the implementation of their Click and Collect service, which I'm sure will be interesting to many, given that we're all mostly headed down that path. So thank you again today, everyone, for participating, and to our speakers and facilitator.